All right, you miserable accursed. It's Thursday, April the 3rd, and you're at the Curse of Politics, the show that doesn't care what liberals or lobbyists think. We're going to do it our way. I'm joined, as always, by Jordan Leichnitz, Kory Teneycke, and Scott Reid. We'll be breaking down a very consequential day in Canadian life and Canadian politics yesterday. But first, we're joined from Politico by Mickey. Mickey, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. I like your t-shirt, Pile of Bones Brewery. Maybe we can knock down trade barriers and get some of that beer here in Ontario.
Exactly. Good old Saskatchewan home brew. So you were at the Poilievre rally yesterday.
I wasn't at the rally. I attended his press conference
Right.
yesterday, and then I went to an event space in North York where a whole bunch of conservative candidates were.
Okay. And what happened?
A job fair.
Well, they did have a lot of booths. Candidates had set up a whole bunch of
Did they
booths.
have as many candidates at the end as they did at the beginning?
Yes, they did.
Oh, okay.
The candidates they stuck around. And
No, I didn't mean that. I meant official candidates.
No, I got what you meant. I was trying to.
The Facebook memories came up on the phone. They're like, "Oh shit, three of us have got to leave immediately."
But they did take the stage. They were essentially appealing to the crowd or pleading to the crowd for help in the Toronto and Greater Toronto area. One conservative candidate was even complaining of having a shortage of volunteers. Incumbent for Thornhill, Melissa Landsman, was telling the crowd that the election is going to be tight in a lot of places and they have to know that they're doing everything they can. Other conservatives were telling supporters, we need help. So it was interesting to be there and speaking to a lot of conservative supporters as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, the places it's going to be tighter in Edmonton, not in the GTA. But what's going on today? Where's everybody at today?
So, as Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he's going to chair a First Ministers meeting in Ottawa that will be virtually. And then he's going to hold a press conference to talk about the government's response to Donald Trump and tariffs. And then he'll be back on the campaign trail after that, heading to Montreal. This evening, he'll appear on Radio Canada's, my French is so bad, Cinq Chefs une Election show.
It's a cooking show.
That's good Saskatchewan French right there.
Thank you. And then conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, he'll also be responding to tariffs today, but from Kingston. He'll take questions from the media, which, by the way, his party is pre-selecting which journalists can ask questions at each press conference. So we'll see who they choose today. And then later this evening, he'll be holding a rally in North Oshawa in an airplane hangar, and I will be there covering it. As for
That's interesting.
Yeah. Also, I went to Durham College in Oshawa, so it feels like going home a little bit. And then shout out Durham College. And then as for New Democrat leader Jagmeet Singh, he's going to announce his plan for what he says is to Trump-proof Canada. And then he'll head to Montreal. And yes, he will appear on the same show as Carney later this evening.
And Poilievre's part of that show too, but virtually, like they're all on it.
I actually don't know about Poilievre.
I don't think it's at the same time.
Yeah, they do independent and one-on-one interviews with the five leaders.
I see. Okay. All right.
Or seven or however many leaders we have now. I mean, I always have to remember.
It's in the title. It's in the title.
Rotating cast,
Scott,
like
Saint,
Batman
5.
villains of.
It's a French word. It's a French word, so Scott's flummoxed, although he will no doubt give us his expert opinion of the French debate, including the candidates' linguistic capacities.
I've anticipated it already.
All right. Mickey, I'm going to remind our audience that when they're done watching this show, they should go to the Ottawa Playbook and read Politico's report on what happened yesterday and what's going to go on today. Always an informative way to start your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the plug, and thanks for having me.
I like Mickey. Mickey's cool.
Mickey's great. Mickey's great. And, Nick is feeling the heat.
Hey, man, take yourself off the diamond. Don't be surprised if no one wants to see you with a bat in your hand ever again.
This is why I try not to leave.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
God,
wow.
Kory, you should hear what they say when you're done.
Yeah.
I got the Lisa Raitt shakes.
All right, so we got a lot to do. Let's get through this polling. There's nothing new today. It's Liberals 45, Conservatives 33, NDP 11, Bloc 6, Greens 3, PPC to 18% undecided. I will note that in the Polera tracking that the Liberals are now at 52 in Ontario, which of course nobody's ever done before. I did a little looking at past election campaigns where there were big Ontario wins. Biggest I can find is 211. And Harper got, I think, 46 or 47% of the vote, and 5 times as many seats as the Liberals or NDP got. So
those big, massive sweep ones, like 97, Chrétien wasn't getting.
Well, sorry, I don't count those. Yeah, when we were winning 100, when the Liberals are winning 100 seats, every seat in the province. Right. Yeah, I was thinking of against a United in a similar constellation.
Gotcha.
Of parties. Nobody's ever done that. All right. So Polaris Polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. And I do thank Enbridge and Polera because this adds a lot of value and content to our show. So thank you very much. Okay. So let's talk about yesterday. I want to talk about 2 things about yesterday. I want to talk about the tariffs themselves, Trump's action itself, and what it does to the campaign. There's so much we could get into here. I want to try to stay focused on what its campaign implications are. And then I want to talk about Poilievre's day yesterday because he had looked to me like another serious attempt at repositioning himself into this fight. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Kory, just to wake you up and get you into the fray here.
Yeah.
Are we in? So yesterday, I'm sort of getting 2 reports out of the media. One of which is, there's some awful stuff going to happen now, and the other one is, maybe Canada got off light here, and maybe this threat isn't as big a deal as we thought it is. Does yesterday signal the end of that phase of the campaign? That is dominated by Trump and tariffs. And now that there's certainty around what's happening in Canada, and maybe it's not as bad as people had feared, that we're into a different phase of the campaign that's less dominated by Trump and tariffs.
I think it depends who you are and what you do in the economy in terms of how much impact this is going to have on you. It's clearly not good news for automakers and those supplying components for automobiles. They're going to be facing a 12.5% tariff, and if we devalue the dollar enough, that might be enough to not shut down facilities in the short term. But in the longer term, this is very bad news for the manufacturing sector in the province, predominantly the province of Ontario. And then for others that are facing tariffs that were already announced, so they're not news coming out of tomorrow, like the steel and aluminum industry and the energy industry that are facing tariffs, like it's not good news there either. Those are the more perplexing ones, David, because the economic harm, while it's experienced in Canada to a certain degree, it's experienced even more in the United States. It really is an example of self-harm. There isn't any short-term way for the U.S. steel or aluminum industry to replace that Canadian product, and that's going to get factored into everything they build with those products in the United States. So it's mystifying, but so was much of what Trump said and did yesterday. And so what does it mean for us in Canada, and can we all move on? Well, if we decoupled from the rest of the planet, maybe we have a better case to say around that. This could be kind of like the 1930s. This could be the opening salvo and a trade fight and reciprocal tariffs, et cetera, that disrupt global trade in a way that sparks not only a recession but a global depression. Like if we're looking to history as a guide as to where this leads, that's the natural endpoint of it. And how quickly that happens will depend as much on how the rest of the world reacts as anything else. So, does Europe come back with a bunch of countervailing tariffs? Does Asia do the same? I think there are indications that China's been, very willing to slap retaliatory tariffs, as we've experienced ourselves. Um, but what does Japan do? What does South Korea do? What does Vietnam do? Some of these countries I think are likely to fold, and others I think are likely to fight. And depending on how many decide to fight and what the implications of that are, it could be very, very bad for all of us who rely on a international, highly integrated international trading system. So I think Trump, if I were to put a capstone on what happened yesterday, is the rest of the world caught up with Canada and Mexico. And the gaslighting from the Trump administration on these tariffs being about fentanyl production in Canada going into the United States, it's very clear it never was. It's very clear, even from the podium yesterday, that the grievances that Trump had were about trade-related things, not around law enforcement issues and border security issues. So we're going to have to deal with that. If we end up having to take on supply management, as probably everyone listening to this knows, pretty big political hot potato. There are a lot of things there that are going to have repercussions for us politically and otherwise. But how quickly does that descend upon us? Does the relatively lower rate, of like 12.5% for Canadian autos, is that cause plant closures? I think that remains to be seen, but my guess is, with the dollar where it is, probably doesn't in the short term, but in the longer term it probably does. is I think the answer. So how key people into that are into that, and how quickly these second feet fall around the world is going to determine how big a story this is in the headlines from day to day for the rest of the campaign.
Scott, what do you think? Is Mark Carney's magic carpet ride over, and is he going to have to fight it out now in the trenches of affordability?
I don't think so, but I think it's reasonable to wonder whether the nature of yesterday's announcement from Trump alters the dynamic, in the sense that Trump has genuinely moved from declaring war on Canada to escalating it to a world war. And so now you have to imagine that all those that he put up on his colored Bristol board, who are getting hit with 47% and 34% tariffs.
I didn't see it, by the way. I heard it was a very sophisticated presentation.
It was a crime against political visuals. It was so bad.
You're reminded, really, really, truly reminded. I know we want to try and keep the focus on domestic politics and implications of the campaign, but Jesus Christ, you were reminded of the harm that one man can cause. Who, if that man is sufficiently deranged, determined, and empowered, and this guy is going to unleash a global recession. Like, it's an almost a certain consequence of what he did yesterday. And so and all of it is unnecessary. Like, none of it was prompted. If there had been other people in charge, it would not have occurred. And yesterday was treated exactly like we talked about yesterday, like a reality television show program. Like, it was a complete carnival of economic illiteracy, lies, and bullshit. And so here in Canada, and you might say, well, now it's going to be the EU, and it's going to be China, and it's going to be Japan, it's going to be India that will be occupying Leichnitz time and burning up the wires to the White House. And possibly, you'll get more impetuous fools like Danielle Smith, who last night declared yesterday to be an important win for Canada, without due regard for the vast impacts that yesterday's going to have on steel, on aluminum, on auto, and all the reverberations of that. But I think the other thing that people aren't necessarily taking into consideration, if they go, well, maybe this means that Trump will be a little less, it won't be, shuttle diplomacy and panic back and forth for the next 2-3 weeks, because it won't just be a bilateral argument with the United States and Canada. So maybe that means that the campaign focus moves slightly, but I think you're going to see job layoffs announced. Like, you saw Windsor last night. They're shutting down the Stellantis plant, and then saying there's going to be further retooling. You're going to see other companies making those announcements in the next couple of days. You're likely to see a global recession begin and a global trade war begin with retaliatory tariffs. And so it's not as though people in British Columbia and Alberta are shielded from the fallout that occurs when China decides, all right, guns a-blazing, and Japan says guns a-blazing, and Korea says guns a-blazing. It is going to an economy that's so wide open, it's going to have a material effect on jobs, on growth. So I don't think that this giant blanket of uncertainty, unease, and anxiety that's been spread across Canada by Donald Trump's announcement yesterday and before, I don't think it's actually going to like go away. And so I think that Poilievre is still going to have to fight on this ground, even though we might not have another gigantic bomb go off 3 days from now or 5 days from now. I just don't think this issue set's going anywhere. And I do think it's going to worsen because you're going to see layoff announcements, and you're going to see companies in Canada relocate to the United States. You're going to see some of those before the 28th of April, saying we got to get behind the tariff wall, and that's going to kick off a political debate.
The choice for Canada's energy future, as we seek to further decarbonize and secure our national electricity grid, is clearly our own made-in-Canada CANDU large reactor technology. CANDUs have been powering the Canadian economy, families, and industry for more than 60 years. Our existing CANDU reactors are being refurbished, updated, and modernized for today's needs and standards to run another 30 years, on time and on budget. But that's not enough. There is a need to build new large CANDUs across the country to help grow our economies with clean baseload power. The Conference Board of Canada will tell you the economic stimulus of that investment will be well worth it. CANDUs use natural uranium fuel, mined and prepared right here at home. No imported enriched fuel needed. That means Trump tariff-proof energy security and reliability. CANDUs also provide vast quantities of life-saving medical isotopes used in hospitals right across the country. CANDUs are more than 90% Canadian, built and run with great-paying union jobs. And credit where credit is due. The province of Ontario and OPG have made the necessary investments in small modular reactors. These will be needed in more remote locations in the future. But it doesn't stop there. Today, the next generation large reactors are being planned for investment in many parts of the country, starting in Ontario. CANDU Energy and their employees are proud to be leading that effort. CANDUs, designed by Canadians, built by Canadians, for the benefit of Canadians. Let's power through. Jordan, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think this issue stays in the news and I think in a really unpredictable way. And both Kory and Scott have hit on the core of what the impact of yesterday is, which is really up until now, we've been kind of alone out there, right? Canada has been targeted much harder by Trump than almost any other country, including Russia or China or anything like that. And so we've been out there sticking our neck out, really fighting back. And now we have company. And so I think that the flip side to what Scott is saying in terms of the disruptions that we're going to see in the global economy because of the scale of these tariffs, the flip side to that is that we also now hopefully will have other countries joining that fight against the tariffs, against their imposition, and looking to Canada to reinforce new trade relationships that are going to be more favorable to us. But just to underline what Scott already said, like we're already seeing shutdowns. So Stellantis Windsor assembly lines going down for 2 weeks. When that happens,
that felt to me like longer than that, Jordan. They said 2 weeks and we'll take a look at it after that. That didn't feel, I wouldn't buy any green bananas.
Yeah.
And we think Easter's going to bring good news. Not fucking likely.
When that happens, of course, it's not just the assembly plant itself. It's you've got feeder plants, you've got all of the economic activity in the community that depends on those folks working. And so we're going to start to see the impacts of these tariffs materially very quickly. And I think the other thing that I was really struck by is, and this is maybe more to the United States, but the degree to which Trump and his team and those around him, like they simply don't care about the markets anymore. Larry Summers estimated last night as markets continued to move after the announcement that there was a $30 trillion loss just last night alone. This is just madness. Like he is economically illiterate and he's taking a wrecking ball to the global economy in a way that's actually going to cost Americans quite seriously. So the problem, though, I think, is that it's going to take a while for that to impact him in any way. So the danger that we have here in Canada is exactly what we saw from people like Danielle Smith, thinking that yesterday was somehow a win, when really the tariffs that Canada continues to have imposed in key sectors can be incredibly damaging, are still in place. And really, for us, the longer that those are in place and the more that they become normalized, the greater the damage will be. So I think, like Scott, this is going to continue to insert itself into the campaign. If anything, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of perhaps a sign from the Americans and a bit of a push from Carney to try to divert this back into a negotiation of some kind of a new trade agreement. And if that's the case, and if that continues, that conversation is going to have lots of entry points into the campaign over the next little while. And we have to see, right? Because, well, I think it would be obviously really desirable for us to get out of a tit for tat tariff war. The degree to which Trump can be trusted to abide by any agreement or any process that he participates in is obviously zero. So there's still a lot of uncertainty here. I think on balance, this is probably fairly good news for Carney. It's a very different response than we might have had in a worst case scenario. And I think at least it would give Canadians the sense that there might be value in keeping these two talking.
Can I mention one other thing, David? I think the Carney, I mean, we'll have to see if it alters the campaign dynamic and focus. And it may slightly. We don't know. So we'll see about that. But I do think one immediate challenge he's going to face is Danielle Smith's comment last night, I think, is indicative of a mindset from her, which is, I really do think it's a preemptive move. And I'm not just trying to dunk on her, although I have no hesitation to dunk on her because I think it's so egregiously stupid and myopic. But I think she's preemptively trying to say there's not a basis here for touching energy, right? Like, we don't have to take the big stick out of the closet. And I think that today's Fed Prov meeting with premiers could be more challenging than the others that he's faced. I think that the uniquely geographic effects of this is really going to hit in the immediate term with manufacturing. It really starts to feel like an Ontario story, and is in part that's what's underlying. And so you start to see some of those cleavages. And I think it's going to be more like Carney always talks about, let's, stronger together and this, I think the need to keep things from fracturing along regional lines, privately around that table and publicly as prime minister, I think that's going to be really important for him.
He must be handling that table pretty well. I noted that Tim Houston yesterday, in his statement on the impact of the tariffs on Nova Scotia, took a paragraph to thank Carney for his leadership through the process, which is kind of a thing to do in the election campaign. Yeah. Scott, let me stick with you for a second, because Poilievre did a preemptive event yesterday morning to try to get ahead of the tariff issue and to try to get in the middle of that conversation. And you were texting me early on that you thought he was nailing it.
Well, I thought it was discernible. And so he began his comments with a clearly differentiated message as compared to what he'd been saying before. Like, it was dedicated to the issue of trade. He presented, it wasn't steeped with a bunch of like, let's blame a bunch of people first and then get into it. Let's bolt some other stuff we were going to do anyway onto the Trump trade issue. He talked about what should our approach to trade be. And, to be candid with you, the content was pretty unspectacular. Like, it was stuff that's been widely, like, let's just get to renegotiating CUSMA. Well, no kidding. You don't think that people, like, that's been the discussion since December at minimum. So, but nevertheless, it looked like a more dedicated focus on it. He then, as Jordan then jumped in on the text and WhatsApp chain and said, he then did move back into, like, he didn't stick with it. He didn't end there. He then moved into Mark Carney and New York and all the stuff. And, I think he stopped short of the plagiarism stuff. But at least you did see like a sort of shifted focus. They brought Carolyn Mulrooney and Mark Mulrooney in to try to, bring up the ghosts of Mulrooney and free trade successes in the past. He talked about the way they were smuggling guns across the border from the United States. I've never heard him say something as pointed as that. It's like, hey, you know what? Like, you're fucking dumping your shit on us. So I thought it was a noticeable difference, but, and I don't know what to say or do, but it also highlighted, I think, one, how it's difficult for him because he couldn't drop the partisan message. So he still had, he He still went there. But two, even as he's speaking, you can see the strategic challenge that they are struggling with, because he's not saying anything that is substantially improved upon what Carney is saying, or what, like, the options available to anyone really playing in this are so relatively straightforward. He can't break brand new ground. And so you look at it and you go, well, that sounds more like a prime minister and a leader. So that makes some sense. But now it feels like he's just an echo. He's a shadow. He's a lighter, less compelling version of Carney. So does that work for you? So if there are conservatives sitting around the war room saying, well, Jesus Christ, if we compete on this, we're competing on their ground and we're not going to win. Yesterday also kind of reminded me of that dynamic and that dilemma.
Right. Kory, what did you think? As somebody that's been looking for a shift in the Conservative campaign, did you see it yesterday?
Well, I was more positive about what he had to say yesterday. I think first and foremost, while I acknowledge what Scott said, that there isn't a lot of new soil there for anyone to till, but he tilled it, and he did it off the top, and I thought he got the tone much better. I noted the stuff on guns and other things too that he said that was some pushback on some obvious points that I think while it's nothing that anyone hasn't heard before or thought of before, I think Canadians appreciate hearing it from Pierre Poilievre. Like I think when what we were talking about yesterday about maybe it's not you to only talk about this, like maybe that's a overstatement. But I do think it is a gate that you've got to, or a threshold that you have to cross there before people are going to listen to you on other things. So, on that front, I thought he should get relatively high marks for what he did yesterday. I guess the challenge will be, where does the conversation go? Because, some of the things like saying, okay, well, we should push this all to a CUSMA renegotiation, et cetera. Well, we know that's now, yeah, sure, that's going to happen. But and yes, things could have been worse yesterday. But if you're working in Windsor and you see Stellantis go down, that's kind of as bad as it gets. Like maybe it could get worse, but for you yourself, you only have one job you can lose, right? It's significantly bad. And so, okay, now what are we going to do? Do we do more countervailing tariffs? There'll be some people who want to see that. Do we slap export taxes on energy? Do we stockpile potash? Like these are all questions that are going to continue to play out. And the urgency in which they're being spoken about is going to vary a lot depending on how hard your community or you personally have been hit by this stuff. So I think the conversation goes on. I like what I saw. I still, question looking at how his negatives have been tracking up and having him continue to be the person, giving those negative messages. Like if you look at, an event like that where you have multiple speakers, why not of some profile? Why not have one of them come out and rev the crowd up by going hard and keep the more positive stuff for the leader? But anyway, maybe that's nitpicking. I don't think it is, but it's a minor point. So look, insofar as it was about trade and tariffs and Trump, I thought the message was good.
Jordan, I'm going to take the blame off the campaign and put it on the candidate. I watch it and I don't believe it. Mm-hmm. I watch him say it and he looks like an actor reciting lines to me. He, in my view, needs to dig deep and find some actual passion about this, the way he has passion for other issues. Because I knew what they were trying to do, but I didn't feel it.
Yeah, and I for me that was the issue with the speech, and I think credit where credit is due. They clearly tried for some form of a pivot here, but I think that, to touch on a little bit what Kory was saying at the end there, like tonally, it was only half done, right? So you had this situation where he spends the first half of the speech or the first 10 minutes of the speech inhabiting that space where he's talking in more detail, I will grant, about his solutions on the trade and tariff fight. And yes, part of the challenge here is that now there's very little daylight. It's hard to fit a piece of paper between Carney, Poilievre, and Singh on their responses on, on some of the technical aspects of the trade fight. And that is tough. That makes it difficult to differentiate yourself. And so that's where I think the idea of him inhabiting it and looking like he is passionate and interested in winning this fight is probably helpful. And he certainly didn't have that vibe yesterday.
Because it isn't about policies, right? Because nobody knows what Carney's
right.
going to do. It's about people. It's about who do you want in the room.
Right.
He's got to become the person you want in the room.
The part where he seems very passionate and where he is most engaged is when he is attacking Carney and saying that Trump wants Carney to win, and really digging deep on all of those attack lines in his own voice, that I think reinforce a lot of the idea that, that he's a negative person, that he is more interested in those types of attacks than he is in the overall success of combating the tariffs. And there was some interesting moments in that speech that said to me that he was directing some of the content, and I think I talked about this a little on the chat group, but where he closes the speech and he talks about, Canada, we're not going to be like a nation of tax collectors. Like, what is this shit? That is nonsense that he is himself putting into the speech.
That's taken straight out of his grade 8 speech.
That's right.
Where he was, it is. There's so much of that kind of.
And I think let's also call out, he had a line in there specifically talking about our friend in the other box here, Kory. That is about retribution. That is about saying, fuck you, I'm right. I'm doing this the right way. And I'm sorry, but that's not a message that is compelling to the voters that are leaving them. And I think that you can go to Bay Street all you want and hold the Mulrooney's up like a talisman, but if you are not saying with your whole chest that you are a serious person who is more focused on winning this tariff war than on punching your opponent, it is not going to do what you want it to do. And so that's why I think yesterday, it was an attempt, but that ain't it. I don't think it got where they needed to go. And the last thing I want to say is I think I loved, just from a pure tour perspective, it was like chef's kiss yesterday that Poilievre went down to Bay Street to do this announcement, introduced by Mulroney. Love it. And Singh was in a building trades Liuna training center surrounded by hard hats. So that doesn't always line up, but yesterday it did on that.
Can I just say, doesn't Jordan's point, though, to be fair to Poilievre, the first time I tried water skiing, I wasn't very good at it. Actually,
the last time you did it, I'm sure you.
The last time I tried water skiing, I looked like an acrobat.
The fawns, like the fawns.
It's effectively the first time that they really put it up front and altered the pure substance. So, I mean, one of the questions is, will he stick with it? Like if it tailed off, and if the parts that weren't it felt more passionate and authentic to him than the parts that were it, will tonight, when he's in Oshawa,
stop and answer your own question. All three of you work with politicians all the time. How difficult is it to get them to stop saying what works in the room?
It's impossible.
So hard. It's so hard.
It is. But I'm asking the question, will they show the discipline at a rally in Oshawa, Uniontown, which they've held that seat for what, 15 years or something now, or 10 years? Why will he stick with this? Will he keep the focus on Trump, and will he not return to his, Margaret Thatcher, little Ronald Reagan greatest hits?
I mean, did he get a personality transplant overnight? I don't think so.
There's going to be 6,000 people there sitting on their hands while he goes at Trump. And he's going to be looking out into a sea of people that are not getting what they asked for, not getting what they came for. And he's going to give it to them.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made that the rallies are not serving the purpose that I think they were in the first week.
David made that point in the first couple of days of the campaign. I really think that's right.
Well, the other element of rallies is they're organizationally a very heavy lift. And if you're at a rally, guess what you're not doing? You're not out canvassing and identifying vote and doing the other things that you need to do with volunteers and activists during a campaign. So they don't come without a cost on the other side. I think there's a case to be made, and I think, Scott, you've made it, and David, I think you have too, in the first week to get people's eyes away from the declining poll numbers and to show life in the party. I think they did that, but to what extent do you want to keep doing that, and is that price worth it? And to what extent is the tendency to want to talk about, feed raw meat to the crowd, actually getting in the way of the two things they really have to do? One is bring back some liberal conservative switchers that have gone to the Liberals, and to get the NDP off the fucking mat. And I think the red meat rhetoric is helping to suppress the NDP vote. I really do believe that.
The thing they have to appreciate is that the people that are in the room are very, very different from the people in Ontario that they need to vote for them. Very, very different.
Well,
and
they're at a
when the
political
people
event
that they need to vote for them see a clip on the news of him talking to those people in the room, they don't get the content and the vibe they need to get.
Well, watching a Trump rally is not great for those voters. Is I think the reality. Maybe if you want to put a sharper point on it, that's what's scaring the shit out of the NDP voters to the point where they're willing to vote Liberal, and that's what's pissing off 55 plus voters and women across the board. And so I think you kind of got to find a way to get your thumb out of NDP voters' eye a little bit, and you got to appeal to some of those that very recently were supporting you.
I know it's only April 3rd, but something you guys are saying here is really profound for Pierre Poilievre and the rest of his life, because the underlying diagnostic that you guys are hinting at is that this guy, it's not that he's failing to choose to change. It's that he cannot and is incapable of making this adjustment. And if the Conservatives lose this campaign and they are then confronted with the question of, do we keep Pierre Poilievre as our leader going forward? Is there another campaign in him where he wins? You're going to have to reflect on the question of, well, if he is a single gear motor, is that sensible to do? I think if things don't move in the polls for him between now and election day, this question's going to start to come up. If he continues to do what isn't working and insisting, like the candidates did in North York, the polls can't be believed, we're going to win this on the ground, it's going to have real implications for him post-election.
I mean, he's been this person for his whole political career. So I think prospects for change are not good.
All right. Hey, it's time for a blessing and a curse. Jordan, give us a blessing or a curse.
This is a curse going out to Danielle Smith, and we're going to scoop Preston Manning into that little basket as well. Victory lapping yesterday and feeding the idea that somehow the announcement yesterday was any form of a win for any part of the country is toxic. I think this notion that that the feelings in Western Canada right now of alienation are like a weather system coming out of nowhere is hot garbage. It is being fed by people like Danielle Smith, Preston Manning, and others who are cynically using it for their own political ends. It is to the detriment of the rest of the country. And I think it's really shameful. I really do. This is an important moment. We are facing an existential economic threat from outside our borders. And this is the shit you guys are choosing to pull. I hope people remember.
Good one. Kory?
Well, I'm going to throw one to my third favorite Greek pollster, Nick Nanos. A blessing to him. I don't know what it is with Greek pollsters and Canadian politics, but you've got Nick Kavalis and Dimitri Panagopoulos and Nick Nanos. All three of them are great.
David Herle
but
Akalopoulos.
yeah, well, yeah. You don't have to be great to be Greek, but there are, anyway, it's a strange fact.
He wanted to say you don't have to be Greek to be great, but what he really said is you don't have to be great to be Greek. So
well, both are true. Both are true.
Carry on, Homer.
Okay, here I go. I'm just
Jill, we're sorry for the hate mail already.
I'm gonna keep digging. I'm just gonna keep digging. Hopefully it's up. But I saw some numbers that he put out yesterday that I thought were really interesting and instructive. And that is how little difference there is on the question of doing export taxes on potash and electricity, which Ford has talked about, and energy. And it's like 75% across the country. Okay. But what is it in Alberta and Saskatchewan? It's like 2/3. It's like 67%. Like, so there is a gap there, but it's in supermajority territory at its lowest point in the country. And that shows, I think, what Nanos's conclusion was, is there's a lot of space here to have a conversation that doesn't get you in trouble, even in those provinces. But to hear the comments of some people talking about it, it's like you would think it would be at 10% there. No, it's like it's a supermajority of people who think that should be a part of the discussion, and I thought that was pretty interesting fact to have out there. So anyway, Nick Nanos, blessing on you for putting some interesting numbers out there.
Excellent. All right. I second Nick's. Nick started. There was a time I didn't like Nick Nanos. Nick started his daily tracking during elections, during the 2004 election campaign. And nobody outside of a political campaign had ever had access to tracking data before. And let me tell you, as a campaign manager, it made it more difficult to fucking spin the troops through a period of decline when suddenly there was an actual data point that was in the fucking newspaper. So you're gathering the troops, you're saying, pay no attention to those terrible headlines because the campaign is going swimmingly well.
It's not our target ridings, don't worry.
The internals are great. And people go, well, no, they can't fucking be because I'm reading polling, right? No.
Those days are gone. Those days are gone.
Scott, you got a blessing or a curse?
Yeah, just let me clarify. When I say that's true for me also, I didn't mean it's also true that I once hated Nick Nanos. I mean that it's also true that David Herle once hated me. And that day may come roaring back soon. I'm going to make it a hat trick because I'm interpreting Kory's blessing curse as effectively a comment on Danielle Smith, and I'm going to go right to it again. She wants to try out the cap of Marshal Pétain. Go right ahead. But yesterday was such an injudicious move to rush out, declare yesterday an important win without due consideration for what the broader complications and implications are going to be, without due consideration for the hardship that's going to be felt immediately and acutely in Ontario. She betrayed that her interest is not the national interest. She doesn't think through that lens. She doesn't talk through that lens. It's all her motivation was on full display. She wanted to put out something she could bicycle it back to Peter Navarro and say, see, there are Canadians who are praising you, and we recognize that you took it easy on us. Ha ha, see, we're on your side and we're with you. And I just thought it was a dreadfully silly and really, I'm struggling not to say something worse, but it was just an injudicious thing to do. And when you contrast it with how Premier Ford, just to rub salt on it, came out yesterday and said, listen, Jesus Christ, we don't even know what it means. The candor of him coming to the microphones and saying, like, who can interpret this? We're going to have to go back and figure it out. And then we'll do it all together as a country with all the premiers and with the prime minister. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. So a double curse on Premier Smith.
All right. I'm tempted to throw the Conservatives a curse for uniquely post-writ vetting their candidates. Not usually the order in which this is done, but it's interesting. But instead, if they do one more, they'll get a curse for that. But my blessing instead to the Conservatives is for their rallies, which we've just discussed, and I agree, probably should be taken out of the daily toolkit. But nonetheless, They're fucking big.
Wow, they look good.
They are fucking big. They are impressive. I have, honest to Christ, never seen anything like it in any campaign that I've been involved in. Any one of those rallies is the size of a campaign ending rally, not a fucking Tuesday night in PEI rally. So I don't think they are a rebuttal to the polls, and I don't think they're necessarily helping their comms, but they're impressive. And yeah, they take a lot of organization, but you can't get numbers like that if there isn't genuine enthusiasm. So while there is while there are not enough people enthusiastic about Poilievre at the moment for the Conservatives, the people who are enthusiastic seem very enthusiastic.
But on that, David, is it not in part because he is so good at that rally format? Like, he has kind of got it down to an art form in terms of working with the crowd and juicing the crowd up. Like, it's like a religious revival meeting or something.
Exactly. Not
And
everybody
he's
believes
in
in
his
faith
element.
healing, but
He
those who
loves
do
it.
sure like
Yeah.
it.
And just as a political athlete, like, it's one of the reasons why he's one of the better ones that I think the conservative movement's ever produced, and his ability to do that. It's a rare thing to find, in a candidate who can do that. It's just, is that the thing to do? And, but the crowd that comes, they're coming there, as you indicated earlier, to see something. Like, they don't want to come and see you read the phone book. Like, they're coming, if they're coming to hear the greatest hits. Like, they don't want to, they don't want to leave and, you haven't played your number one hit or your number two hit. Like, they want to hear it. Right. But it kind of puts a little bit of a chokehold on your campaign messaging, because you're having to roll through the greatest hits every night.
There you go. Kory says they brought a sprinter to a downhill skiing competition. Yeah. What was that, Scott?
I just said it's hard to sing Neil Diamond when the crowd wants "Pour Some Sugar on Me."
Right. Right. There you go.
All right. Thank you all, especially Kory. You're up at a ridiculous hour this morning. Really appreciate it. Jordan and Scott, thanks for being along. Thank you to our sponsor, Can Do, and our polling sponsor, Enbridge. And thanks to all of you who watch or listen and are doing it every day. We super appreciate it. Thanks so much. And we'll see you tomorrow for the last day of week 2. See you then.